The city burned in silence. Neon bled across rain-slicked streets, painting the towering megastructures in hues of violet and crimson. Somewhere in the labyrinth of steel and shadow, two forces collided, one wreathed in eldritch fire, the other in raw, unraveling psychic fury. Doctor Strange hovered above the wreckage, his cloak of levitation whipping in the storm winds. His hands trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the horror of what he'd just done. Below him, Jean Grey lay half-buried in shattered concrete, her crimson hair fanned out like spilled blood. Her eyes, once blazing with the Phoenix's wrath, were now wide and dazed. He hadn't meant to break her. The battle had been chaos, dimensional rifts splitting the sky, reality itself warping under their clashing whittles. Strange had only meant to contain her, to stop the destruction. But in a desperate moment, he had torn through her psychic shields with a forbidden incantation. And now, Jean shuddered, pushing herself up on shaking arms. Her gaze locked onto him, not with rage, but something far more dangerous. Fascination. You? Her voice was a whisper, yet it cut through the storm. You hurt me? A smile, slow and unsettling, curled her lips. No one's done that in a long time. Strange blood ran cold. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. The city's underbelly stirred. Gangs, mercenaries, and worse, all drawn to the scent of weakness. And Jean Grey was smiling at him like he'd just made this personal. As Strange reaches out to help her up, Jean's fingers close around his wrist, not to steady herself, but to pull him closer. Her whisper is a blade in the dark. Let's see how strong you really are. Jean's grip was iron. Strange tried to pull back, but her fingers dug into his wrist like talons. The air between them crackled, not with magic, not with telekinesis, but something far more volatile. Hunger. You don't want to do this, Strange warned, his voice low. The Sanctum's training screamed at him to break free, to cast a shield, to run. But something in her eyes, the way the remnants of the Phoenix fire still flickered in her irises, froze him in place. Jean tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle. You're afraid of me, she murmured, but not for the right reasons. A psychic echo pulsed between them, her hands around his throat. His magic unraveling inside her mind, the taste of blood, hers or his, he couldn't tell. Strange gasped, wrenching himself out of the vision. His heart hammered against his ribs. That wasn't real. Jean's smile sharpened. Not yet. Then the ground exploded. A shockwave of telekinetic force hurled them apart, sending Strange crashing through a fractured storefront. Glass rained down like knives. He rolled to his feet, spells already forming at his fingertips, but Jean wasn't attacking. She was laughing. There he is, she purred, stepping over the wreckage toward him, the Sorcerer Supreme who fights back. Somewhere in the alley shadows, something moved. Strange didn't dare look away from Jean, but he felt them, watching, waiting. The city's scavengers, drawn to the scent of a wounded predator. And Jean? She wasn't wounded anymore. The first shot rang out, a high-caliber round aimed straight for Jean's skull. She didn't even flinch. The bullet stopped an inch from her temple, hovering like an insect in amber. Her gaze never left Strange. The bullet trembled in midair. Jean didn't blink, didn't breathe. The projectile hung between them like a grotesque pendulum, its hollow point tip gleaming under the neon haze. Strange watched as the metal began to twist, not from telekinesis, but from something deeper, something hungry. Jean. The gunman screamed first. A soundless psychic pulse rippled outward. The would-be assassin collapsed, clawing at his skull as his synapses frayed. Around them, a dozen more shadows dropped. Mercenaries, gang scouts, all convulsing as Jean Grey unmade their minds with a single thought. Strange felt the backlash like a physical blow. The Phoenix wasn't just awake, it was playing with her now. Jean exhaled, and the bullet dissolved into rust. You see, she stepped over the twitching bodies, her boots leaving no imprint in the rain. This city is a graveyard waiting for its corpses. Strange's sling ring burned against his fingers. One twist, and he could be anywhere. Tibet, Kamartaj, another dimension entirely. But running meant leaving her here, and that thought terrified him more. Jean's fingers brushed his jaw. Cold, precise. You could stay, she whispered. We could burn it all down together. For a heartbeat, just one. He considered it. The sling ring's portal flared to light behind him, but Jean's other hand seized his collar. The magic screamed as she forced it shut. Her lips brushed his ear. Too late for second thoughts, Doctor. The scent of scorched magic filled the air as Jean's fingers closed around the dying portal's edges. The dimensional rift screamed, a sound like fracturing glass and tearing flesh, before collapsing inward with a thunderclap that shattered every window on the block. Strange staggered back, his sling ring smoking. What the hell was necessary? Jean flexed her hand, examining the burns now lacing her fingertips. The flesh knit itself back together before his eyes. You don't get to leave. Not until we finish this. Somewhere beneath them, the city groaned. The street buckled as something vast and unseen moved beneath the asphalt. Not Jean's power, but something answering to it. Manhole covers blew skyward as tendrils of black energy slithered upward like roots from hell itself. Strange's breath hitched. You're not just tapping the phoenix. You're merging with the ley lines. Jean's pupils dilated, her irises bleeding to solid black for one terrifying second before flickering back to green. Clever man. She stepped forward, the ground bending to meet her footfall. Now ask yourself, why would I need to do that? The answer came too late. From every shadowed alley, from every broken window they emerged, dozens of hollow-eyed civilians, their movements jerky like marionettes. Their mouths opened in unison. She wants you to. The possessed swarmed forward, but their hands don't attack. They grasp, they pull. And as Strange's boots leave the ground, Jean's voice echoes through the hive mind. Let's show you what real power looks like. Hands, hundreds of them. They lifted Strange like a martyr upon a pyre, fingers pressing into his ribs, his thighs, the hollow of his throat, not hurting, but presenting him. The sea of hollow-eyed faces tilted upward in unison as Jean approached, her bare feet floating inches above the ruined street. You keep asking why, she murmured. The blackened ley lines pulsed beneath her skin like corrupted veins. But you haven't asked the right question. Strange struggled against the grip of the enthrall, but his magic sputtered, drained by whatever dark energy Jean had woven into the city's bones. The cloak of levitation strained against unseen bonds, its edges fraying. Then enlighten me, he growled. Jean's smile was a razor cut. She pressed a single finger to his sternum. The world split. Asterisk, a dead earth. The sky burned with the corpse light of 1,000 dying stars. Below, a throne of fused skeletons, and upon it, a being of fire and shadow wearing Jean's face. At its feet, a single kneeling figure in tattered crimson robes asterisk. Strange wrenched back into reality with a gasp. The vision clung to him like tar, but one detail seared brighter than the rest, the kneeling man's eyes. His own. Jean withdrew her finger, leaving his skin smoking. Now you see, she whispered, this isn't an end. It's an invitation. Around them, the crowd began to chant, a language older than human tongues. The ground cracked wider. Something in the abyss below stirred. The chanting reached a crescendo. Jean's hands framed Strange's face. And the first tentacle of living darkness erupted from the fissure. The tentacle struck like a viper. Cold, wet darkness coiled around Strange's ankle, not just touching him but seeping in, threading through his veins like liquid obsidian. He screamed as the corruption spread, his nerves alight with a pain beyond physical agony. This wasn't possession. This was integration. Jean watched, her head tilted in clinical fascination. It doesn't hurt after the first shock, she lied sweetly. The chanting crowd began to change, their hollow eyes filled with the same creeping blackness, their mouths stretching wider than human anatomy allowed. The pavement beneath them rippled like water as more tendrils emerged, each one seeking a host. Strange magic roared in rebellion. Eldritch sigils flared across his skin, battling the invasion. But the dark energy wasn't just attacking him, it was learning him, adapting. And Jean was smiling. Just as the darkness reached Strange's heart, a new sigil flared to life on his chest, one not of his making. Jean's smile vanished. No, she breathed. That's impossible. The sickle burned white, not the gold of sorcery, but the searing purity of forgotten magic. The tentacles recoiled as if scalded, their inky flesh bubbling away from Strange's skin. Jean staggered back, clutching her own chest where a matching mark now glowed. The Vishanti seal, she snarled. You let me touch your soul. Strange crashed to his knees, coughing up black ichor. Had to get you. Close enough. His grin was bloody, triumphant. Turns out the Phoenix isn't the only force that imprints on its hosts. The ground quaked as the wounded void beneath them shrieked. The possessed civilians collapsed, their stolen energy snapping back to Jean in a violent backlash. For the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. The mark wasn't just a ward, it was a tether. And Strange began to pull. Jean's scream split the sky as the tether yanked it. And then silence. The city was gone. Or rather, they were gone from the city. Strange found himself kneeling in an endless gray waste, the air thick with floating cinders. Before him, Jean crouched in the ashes, not as a goddess or a monster, but as a woman, just a woman. The phoenix fire in her eyes had dimmed to embers. Where? Her voice cracked. Nowhere, Strange said. His body was half disintegrated, one eye milky with blindness. The space between spaces, the Vishanti's waiting room. A wind stirred the ashes around them. Shapes formed and dissolved. A child's laugh, a battlefield, a quiet breakfast in another life. Jean touched her face, startled to find tears. You could have killed me. Strange's remaining eye held infinite weariness. I know. The truth hung between them, heavier than any spell. He hadn't wanted to. And that, more than any magic, was what finally broke her. The ashes began to move. Jean lunged forward, not to attack, but to catch him as Strange finally collapsed. Somewhere beyond the void, a door opened, and the long road home began.